Good evening. My name is Tony Clark. I'm a proud member of the My Brother's Keeper Task Force. We're excited to be here this evening with Dr. Victoria Greer, Superintendent of Cambridge Public Schools. Today's conversation is different from our previous conversations on the public square as we partner with 22 CityView and a number of community conversations that we hope elicits conversations not only in our city, but provides a national context of things that are going on across the country. This is especially important conversation because we are here in person today, something that we haven't done. It is critically important to state that in a couple of weeks, we are asking our young people and families to place their mask on and to start a new school year. So we, as My Brother's Keeper Task Force, but also members of this particular city, believe we have to model that behavior. So today, it is our hope that we are modeling. Today's conversation is one of a series that I know that not just us, but members in this community will have. It is important to state that while we are members of My Brother's Keeper Task Force, we are members of this community. So this is a we conversation. At no particular point are these conversations elicited by anyone in our group solely. They are a byproduct of the conversations that we have had throughout this community over the last 18 months as we have struggled like the nation in confronting COVID and the myriad of things that come with it. Tonight's conversation will look at a myriad of things that not only look at our district as an entity, but our country as a whole. We want to push the proverbial status quo. We want to challenge the world. And quite frankly, we want Cambridge to be the best school district in the nation. We have the ingenuity, we have the talent, and quite frankly, I believe we have the drive. So I want to be frank. This is not a conversation to disparage our school district. This is not a conversation to say what we should and could and will do if we work together, but this is a conversation about imagining, putting our heads together, pushing ourselves, moving from good to great. I also want to acknowledge all of the staff and faculty from the district who are here. I won't state your names, and also former staff and faculty. And one thing that I want to state that is critically important to us at MBK, I see folks like Ruby Pierce in this room and others who may be watching, is that we ask questions. We are not folks who can't be learneth. And so we hope to learn from every person in this particular room and all those watching on YouTube at this moment. So I want to thank from Dr. Turk and others who are here, who represent this community, but most importantly, represent the 7,000 young people and their families in this district. So before we begin, I want to provide Dr. Greer with providing you with some context, and she's giving us a little bit of homework, so I'm going to put that on her. But I'm going to let her give you some insight into the sheet that you guys have in front of you.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you.
I'm really excited about this community conversation, and I hope this is the first of many.
Thank you.
Also, I've been in the district now for about 60 days. It actually seems like I just started yesterday. And part of my entry into the district is for me to also do a tour of listening and learning. And I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to get input and feedback from the community around things that we are doing well, things that we may still have challenges around, areas where we are dreaming and hoping for, and then also what are some of our expectations for the district, and what expectations are we setting in order to support our students. This information is used to inform my work and to help me lead and direct in the district, but it's also used for us to think about how we want to utilize our ESSER 3 funds. We are taking an opportunity now to also garner feedback around how we want to facilitate the disbursement of those resources, and part of that process is to engage the community. So as I'm having conversations about, through my entry, I'm also, I call it a twofer as an educator. I'm getting a twofer by also engaging you around the conversations in regards to our ESSER 3 funding and how we can best support the work that we're trying to do in the district and supporting our students to excellence.
Thank you. So as you think, thank you for that, and thank you for providing us with a platform to help. One of the things when we think about this district is how can we be family? Absolutely. And how can we work together? And I think it's important to kind of get a sense of who you are. And I know you're coming back, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what brings you to this work? Before we even get into your mission and vision for the district, I think it's important to put down all the proverbial titles and just figure out who is Dr. Victoria Greer.
Yes, absolutely. And you almost said it, who is Victoria Greer? You know, the doctor is something that I've attained and I'm very proud of and my family is very proud of. But at the end of the day, I'm just Victoria. So who am I? I can regurgitate my resume, but that's not what I think I need to do. That's published.
Right.
I think it's important for people to know, number one, I'm a lifelong educator. I am entering my 23rd year in education, and I'm a country girl. I know you all may hear that little southern accent. We've been...
I thought London.
London?
I thought London.
It is definitely southern. So, and I'm very proud of being a Tennessee, growing up in Tennessee and being born, bred, and raised. And my family and I relocated here about 8 years ago from Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm married. I have 2 wonderful sons, Walter III and James David. And my husband is Walter Jr.
Walter Jr.
So we're southern, right?
Okay.
Junior.
Junior.
Okay.
Right.
And we relocated here from Nashville, Tennessee, for me to become the assistant superintendent here in Cambridge. And Cambridge is our home. So we've lived here for the past 8 years. We love it and enjoy it. But really who I am in my roots, a small town. I'm a small town girl, rural town called Covington, Tennessee. It's about 45 minutes outside of Memphis, Tennessee. And no, I am not from Memphis. I am from Covington, and I claim that wholeheartedly. I grew up on a farm, and I ride horses, I do. I grew up on a farm, and my parents sharecropped when I was a little girl. My parents sharecropped with my grandparents. And so I grew up watching them do that. And really interesting thing about me and my upbringing is that my parents actually were laborers. So my mother was a domestic. My father, as I said, he sharecropped, and then later on he went to work for the city in the sanitation department. And I have one sister, and my parents instilled in us to dream big, and they had very high expectations for us. And they would tell us every day, I can remember this very early on, my mother and my father both would just say, you all are gonna be someone. You're gonna grow up and you're gonna go off and you're gonna do great things. And they set that expectation for us, and they set it very high. And as we began to enter school and matriculate, they said, you know what, we may not have had an education, but you're going to get an education. You're going to graduate from high school, you're going to attend college, and you're going to go off and you're going to make an impact on this world. And so I've learned very early on that high expectations for young people is very important. And I've taken that as part of the work that I've done as an educator and now as an education leader. And just setting the bar really, really high. I believe in dreaming big. I believe that if we dream big and we set high expectations, our children, our young people, and our teachers and our educators will rise to the occasion. So that's just a little bit of who I am. You know, I tend to say I'm multifaceted. I love to laugh. I love to have fun.
Right.
One thing I told my team, I was like, this work is too serious and too hard, and for us not to have fun with it. Right. I want us to enjoy what we do and enjoy it every day. And for me, making a difference in the lives of young people is huge. It's huge, and that's what really brings me joy. You know, I had teachers and mentors throughout my entire education career, and I believe my 4th grade teacher, Glenda Pryor, is the reason why I do a lot of the things the way I do them, because she modeled for me, and I wanted to be just like her. And so to have someone impact me in that way, I knew when I went into education and teaching, I wanted to be that same. I wanted to do that same exact thing.
Right. So, thank you. As you talk about your mom, you talk about, you know, your former teacher, Ms. Pryor. When we think about Cambridge, we think about in terms of education. Well, we also think about what we believe to be a bevy of resources. When you talk about the fact that in terms of the budget is for fiscal year 22 to over $223 million, yes. Right? And we're talking that's $10 million up. We're also looking at the fact that we have relatively small number of pupils, about 7,000 folks. However, we have to deal with the reality we lost 400 families, during COVID. With that being said, when we think about Cambridge, when we think about all the things in which you spoke to, but also using your life experience, can you tell us your mission and vision for this district as you see it?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, let me speak a little bit to my core values.
Okay.
And I think speaking to my core values both, and they're both my professional and my personal core values. Number one, I lead out with integrity. I tell people that my integrity is not for sale.
Right.
There's no way that I will never sell my integrity. So that's extremely important, because I believe when you work with young people, you have to have high integrity, because we have a responsibility to them and to their futures. And another one of my core values is honesty and teamwork. And you will hear me speak of team very, very often, because the reality is it takes an entire community to do really good work for young folks. But to talk about my vision, you know, CPS actually has a vision, and
Right.
it's centered around joyful learning and really ensuring that students have individualized learning opportunities in our district. And I definitely align to that. And then I think I dive a little deeper in regards, remember I talked about dreaming big,
Right.
and having high expectations. And when I think about our school district and what my hopes, my dreams, and my vision is for us, I envision us being a school district that, number one, we are hyper-focused. Everything that we do is about the student. Every decision that we make, every move that we make, we have the students at the center of every one of those decisions. And not just the students, I'm meaning every student, each and every one of them. From the youngest to the 3-year-olds to those who go through the age in our transition programs to the age of 22. That is extremely important. Another one of my goals and visions centers around us being a tight-knit community where every administrator, every educator holds high expectations for each and every young person that crosses our doors and comes through our doors. That expectation is how we get the outcomes for them. You know, I talked about growing up rural poor, and the one thing is everyone who, from my parents all the way through as I matriculated through school, and I played sports, so I had several coaches. I was a 3-sport athlete, and I had 3 different sport athletes, athletic coaches, and those coaches always believed in me and set very high expectations, not necessarily around the sports, because I was just an average player. It was more so they saw my potential around leadership, and they saw my potential academically, and they continued to set high expectations. So a vision that I have is that just because kids are poor, just because children have challenges in their lives, and their families may have challenges in their lives, just because families may be transitional and homeless, and I can name all the different things that we are challenged by, and our children, our families are challenged by, that does not mean we have low expectations. The worst thing we can do for a family that is struggling, for a child that is struggling, is to have low expectations for them, because they will never attain what we need them to attain. So high expectations at the top of my list for the vision, that we won't look at a student and say they can't do a thing. Another area that I'm really passionate about is, as it relates to my vision, is that we focus intensively on quality, effective instruction for all. That we really think about how we utilize our resources to dive deeper into our instructional practices, that we are collaborative across all areas of the content in the departments, and that we really think about how our instructional practices impact the outcomes for kids, and that we're not only that we think about that, but we're willing to make those shifts based on the needs of the students. Another vision I have, and all of this kind of feeds in, at the end of the day, I'm talking about these small little incremental steps, but at the end of the day, I want the Cambridge Public Schools to be the top school district in the nation. That's what I envision. I envision that we will have a high school that is ranked in the top 10 of high schools in the state of Massachusetts. And I understand in our community, because I'm a part of this community, I live here, that oftentimes we're concerned with ranking, and that's not important, and all those different things. It is extremely important. Let me tell you why. Ranking is not about adults. Ranking is about kids. We're talking about a game changer. Colleges, look at that. Employers, look at that. You come from a top-ranked school district, a top-ranked high school, the door is open for you. Money to attend college if you so choose. Job, internships, externships, opportunities. And so it's not just about us and the number, it's more so about the opportunities that our rankings will open up for our students. Think about how many I'm sorry I'm going on, but I'm really passionate about this. But think about how many black and brown students do go to college and leave with massive student loans. And then by the time they go out into the work world, they're almost in poverty. And so attaining that didn't give them economic advancement. And so this ranking makes a big difference for our students and their families.
So to follow up, I agree, and we're here to support you in that. When thinking about all the pieces that you mentioned, how do you create alignment between administration, principals, faculty, staff, paraprofessionals, the custodian, to get to that place that you want to be? Where's that alignment at?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a great question. It starts with having a vision, communicating that vision, working closely with my team from the cabinet down. The cabinet, this is the expectation that I have, is that I cast a vision. The cabinet members who have responsibilities for supervising principals, they take that into the work that they do with principals. But we had a wonderful 3-day retreat. I'm not a hands-off leader, I'm a hands-on leader. So what will happen is people will hear that what I expect and what the vision is all the way down at the ground level. And not only that, the way we begin to align this work is we wrap ourselves around the goals and the focus. We think about how alignment is not every school doing the same exact thing. Alignment is around having similar practices across every school, which that's a challenge that we have right now. And it's important that we do that. And so it's really about having really thoughtful communication, taking opportunities to sit with educators so they really understand. It's around having clear teams at schools where we're talking about and having conversations about student outcomes, how are we going to support students, what types of supports are we going to put in place for students. It's doing that in the same, across the schools in every way. And part of the vision and part of the conversations that I've been having with Dr. Turk, who leads our teaching and learning team, she's my right hand, just so you all know, and she leads the teaching and learning team. And the conversations that we've been having is about us doing co-walkthroughs together, where we're going in and we're sitting with our principals and we're sitting and having conversations with our teachers. We're sitting and having conversations with our support staff. We're sitting and having conversations about students. And we're there to support. We're not necessarily there to tell people what to do. We're there to be thought partners with them. And that's how you get that alignment. You can't be away from the work. I shared with my staff, or my administrative staff earlier this week, that you're going to see me a lot. You're going to see Dr. Turk a lot. You're going to see many of us a lot, especially now we can be back in buildings. And what you're going to see us do is come down and have conversations with you. I cannot make good, thoughtful recommendations and decisions about our work if I'm not close to the work. And so that's how you begin to get that alignment across the different schools.
So speaking of that, in terms of you took on this role, 7/1/2021.
I did.
That's maybe a lottery number I may play a little later.
You should. It's a good number.
With that being said, in terms of, what are you started to speak to it, and I appreciate it in terms of the walkthroughs and other things in which you've been doing. What has the first 60 days been like?
Yeah. And
what do you foresee maybe the next, right before we start school? But can you talk to us about what those first 60 days have looked like for you?
Sure. I've hit the pavement. Yes, I hit the pavement really quickly. And many of you should have, I hope, have received my entry plan and the outline entry process that I have in place. And what I've been doing, I've been having one-on-one conversations. I've sat with each and every school committee member and have had conversations discussing the district. I've sat one-on-one with almost all of my principals, I think outside of 4. And so we have those coming. I've been having conversations with the city manager and various city partners to really understand how we can align our work across the school department in the city, because we do share children across programs. I've been reviewing data and documents. We've had a retreat with the executive leadership team. We had a 2-day retreat last week where we began to think about how we best work in a really thoughtful and cohesive manner in order to be the best leaders that we can for our schools and for our staff. We just, this past Tuesday, Wednesday, and today, we've been in a retreat with our school and district administrators and leaders, and we've been rolling out professional development and screeners for reading, math, and also for social emotional health. And so we've been really thoughtful about the time we've been spending together, and it's really all about us preparing for the opening of schools. I'm trying to garner as much information as I can, as quickly as I can, to move us forward. And so I've been visiting schools. Mr. Maloney and I have been walking through buildings so I can see the condition of the buildings, especially with us transitioning the Tobin School and the Vaseline Upper School to begin that construction. I've also intentionally met with principals in their buildings so I can see and see what their needs are, and ensuring that the buildings are up to par for the school year. A lot of time has been spent with the public health department and us working and preparing for implementation of our safety measures and to combat COVID and put together mitigation.
Can you speak to that a little bit in terms of, as we're seeing that conversation manifest itself nationally, right?
Yes.
And part of why I just want to just reiterate that part of why this conversation is here is because it's very important that we model that behavior, right?
Absolutely.
In terms of, so if you have kind of been on the public square, you have seen us online, and I love that platform, although my 9-year-old's telling me, to get out of his way from time to time, and, But with that being said, it's critically important that we as the adults understand that we're asking young people, like my child and others, to have masks on all day. We're asking our educators to be masked up all day. We're asking a number of our custodians, our coaches, but also in terms of, it's critically important that we understand what systems and protocols are in place to address the emerging, I'm not a scientist, nor do I play one on TV, unlike a lot of folks who do that on Instagram, but, there is a variant out there, right?
Sure.
There are, some fears and anxieties. We're seeing places in the South who are making kind of pivoting on some of the things in which they're doing. So how does your office look at COVID and help us approach this, from protocols, weekly testing? What does that look like?
Sure.
For our young people and our adults?
Because I know the South situation very well. Let me say, we are very fortunate to live in Massachusetts because we have systems that support us in being safer than our southern partners. But sure, there were already some very strong practices and protocols in place prior to me arriving, so I cannot take responsibility for that by any means. Dr. Turk and Mr. Maloney and our public health department, Dr. Dobertine, Tracy Rose Tynes, and that group and additional scientists and medical professionals have been a part of this team for the past 18 months and helping to guide us through this. We have a multi-layered approach to mitigate the spread of COVID. What we've been doing all summer, and this was actually, again, happening all throughout the school year, once a week we come together in what we call our situation room. Okay. I had to think
Jake
about
Tapper?
it for
The situation.
No. But we all come together and we review the most recent health data and information, and we talked through that. We talked through testing protocols, how to garner the information that we need to get a really good understanding of how many folks, including our youth, are vaccinated.
Right.
We have conversations about each school and how the nursing teams and the medical teams in the schools will facilitate pool testing and testing, and also what are some of the strategies that we need to use in order to mitigate the spread as far as washing hands and things like that. We've continued to also try to put out as much information in a really thoughtful and strategic manner. As you know, at our last school committee meeting on August the 3rd, I recommended masking for all.
Right.
And the school committee thankfully supported that recommendation, and so we will be wearing a mask because we do know that high quality masking is the key to mitigate the spread of the virus, and so we're really focusing on that quite a bit. When you think structurally, we've continued to put out professional development. Mr. Maloney is going to each and every group, and he and the many people on his team are engaging all principals, all administrators. We've gone through each and every one of the changes as far as the guidelines are concerned that has come out and been released from Department of Education, as well as all the updates that we shared on August the 3rd in our safety protocol. There's a safety manual that's online, so anyone who really wants the specific details, I encourage them to go online and go through that in detail. Over the course of this school year, beginning the school year, we're actually been encouraging persons to have conversations with us when they have questions, that we respond and we answer those questions for them. We're still working through some of the information that we're receiving from DESE in order to determine when there's a positive case and the quarantining piece and how we're going to support students who may have to be quarantined. One of the changes in the guidelines that we will be implementing is a test and stay model. What this is when there's been a potential exposure, not necessarily a positive, but a potential exposure to someone who is who has tested positive. In the past, any close contacts were automatically quarantined. Now, because we have the ability to do rapid tests, students or anyone who was exposed will go through a test every day for 5 days. And as long as they test negative, they get to remain in school. So there will not be a need or requirement to quarantine. And so that's a very new guideline. The Dr. Dobertine and the team really are supportive of that, because there were high levels of quarantining happening just because someone may have been in close contact, right, but they may not have been positive. So the daily testing for those folks is what makes the difference.
You raised a question that made me think about our school district seems to always have a lot going on all the time. And it often seems that learning looks different in every school. Can you share your thoughts about this and what you have determined the focus of the district will be this year, particularly when you talk about COVID and coming off the pandemic as a result of the school closures and, in some ways, inconsistency?
Yeah. Yes. Yes, we are a very busy school district. And in our, we are very big. I call us a complicated organism, but a beautiful organism, because we have many different moving pieces and moving parts. And so I think one of the things is and it's not just about this year. I think something that we have had a lot of discussion around is how do we have a very thoughtful, intense, hyper-focus around the most critical and most important areas, and how do we phase implementation of various initiatives and instead of doing mass numbers of initiatives all at one time. And also, how do we align the initiatives? You know, if we really have a really good, thoughtful district plan and district approach, our initiatives are interconnected, which means that one initiative will support the outcomes that we're trying to get to with students. We may be doing different things, but each one of them supports the outcomes of the other. And so when I think about this school year, I've committed us to focus this year on implementing high yield instructional strategies. And that means the teaching strategies that are going to be used in the classroom. Our instructional coaches and our staff have already been working on that for quite a bit of time, but this is the year that we're really focusing intensely on that, especially since there has been so much loss of school and seat time in front of a teacher. It's important that we do that. Also, we're trying to optimize our use of various types of data sets. Because we also need to know where students are. Right. What skills have they attained? Where do they have they lost skills and things such as that manner. So this school year, as I mentioned earlier, we are implementing what we call data screeners for reading, math, and also for social emotional learning. Screeners are quick. They're not long assessments. They're not long tests. They're a quick snapshot of what has been taught over a certain period of time. And over that period of time, we want to know how students are doing. Once teachers get that data back, they sit with their teams and they look at what skills may still be lacking, and they analyze that and determine if they need to reteach. They determine if the student is a student that may need some other type of intervention or support. And so we will be implementing comprehensive data teams across every school, from the elementary, upper schools, as well as the high school. In those data teams, we're also, like I said, we're bringing on the screeners across those 3 areas. Another area of focus for us is that we also are focusing our efforts in the area of equity, inclusion, and belonging. We have a brand new office that we call the Office of OEIB, and Mr. Fernandez and his team, they're here tonight. They have been working very hard over the course of this whole summer, preparing to facilitate the work and moving that forward in the district. You know, it's really important that we understand, and Mr. Fernandez and our team have had a lot of conversations around this, is that we do not look at the work of equity as an isolated activity. The work of equity is a through line through everything that we do. And so part of their work and what they've been preparing is professional development, ensuring that our staff are equipped with what they need in order to address these issues, but also that we are embedding and utilizing equity audits at the school level, at each school level, and also, which would look more like a self-assessment, but then also that we could do comprehensive equity audits across the district and also across departments. And when you think about the work that we want to do in leveraging that department, I think I may be getting to some of our other conversation, yes. But in leveraging that department, I think what we have to remember is that their team is really thoughtful. The team is working to make sure that we're in line and not necessarily trying to do a different activity outside of the actual teaching and learning process. The work of equity in what we do is around ensuring that our curriculum is responsive to the needs of students, that our instructional practices are responsive to the needs of students, and that also that we create a community of care and belonging within each and every school community for all of our students and their families.
Yeah, it's actually a question I was going to ask you, Greer, particularly around, but I guess I'll still ask it around the equity. You know, you talked about new initiatives, and obviously that's a new initiative, a new office. I don't want to call it initiative. I think sometimes we call things initiatives and programs. Right. With all due respect, in this city, they die. Yeah. And we don't want something to die. So speaking to that, to kind of just staying there around the Diversity and Equity Office, and if I've named it incorrectly, please blame it on my head, not my heart.
Sure.
But I want to ask the question in terms of how are you helping to assess that at each school, that the work in which you speak to, obviously it will look different at each school because every leader, it's not the same. Everyone is not the same particular vision, but how do you kind of assess it at each school to make sure that the strands of that work is really being highlighted and supported?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would tell you that comes down to the work they've been doing around setting goals. So they have submitted their draft goals to me. We've reviewed them. They're already working on that. In those goals, we're also looking at what the measures are. How are we going to measure that we're meeting these goals? And then what matrices are we going to use in order to facilitate that? And that's the way you ensure, because each school is going to be required to meet those goals that we have. Each school is going to be, and we will be looking at outcome measures. It'll be varied ways that we'll measure that. There's survey data, there's school culture data. Even in those equity analysis, we get a baseline, and then you go back and you do a temperature check. And that will tell you if there's shifts and changes that are happening around the areas of equity, inclusion, and belonging.
As you were talking about that, I think, and as I look out in the audience, I think about some folks. And I want to really kind of think about, pivot a little bit to, COVID-19, the racial unrest, not just George Floyd, but Breonna Taylor and a myriad of other things, has told us what we already knew, particularly, and I'll look over here, that there is a need to be more intentional about trauma-informed schools.
Sure.
So how are you doing that? How do you see that work being done in this particular district, more intentional, considering that obviously these are things that we knew, but we also have had a clear backdrop for the last 18 months to help us see some of the issues that are there that
Sure.
are causing some of these mitigating and oftentimes intergenerational traumas.
Sure, absolutely. The district has had initiatives around social emotional learning for quite some time, and I think there's a couple of things that I would like to clarify. Is that social emotional learning is something that is truly the heart and the breadth of the work of the district, and then there are also areas where we need to help students and support them when they have mental health needs, because the two are not the same. Social emotional learning, if we build strong skills around that actually helps to mitigate challenges that persons may have with mental health issues. The reality is that any one of us can have challenges around mental health at any point in time. For example, you have a death in the family. You may suffer from depression or anxiety for a period of time. The hope is that you've built strong enough skills in your social emotional area to have some coping skills to get through that time period and not get stuck in that challenge or that area of depression or that area of anxiety. I say that to say that the core of what we do is in our social emotional approaches. And us, I spoke to having a screener. Now we're going to be screening students in that area around what the skill development is and what skills do students have in that. That starts very early. And the way we get to trauma-informed schools is that it starts with that, having a strong, what I call a tier 1 instructional approach around building skills for students, around negotiations, around problem solving, around self-regulation, things like that. Over time, if you build that, then what you get in the end, and this lends to some of the challenges that we have with our youth and young adults and in violence, is that we hope that we build those skills over time, that when you become an adult, you know how to deal with those challenges that lead to violence, right? But when we think about our focus around trauma-informed schools, we've invested many resources that we know that's going to have a huge impact. There is a social worker now in each and every one of our schools. We funded a director of social emotional learning, in which Dr. Turk is facilitating now the hiring process for that position. Our goal with that position is that individual will work with us to put together a comprehensive framework around supporting our students. But the work of trauma-informed schools doesn't stop here at the school district. This is a community, it's going to take community partnerships, because our students are with us for about 6 hours or 6.25 hours a day. When students are challenged in the area of social, emotional, and mental health, then they go home to their families, to their caregivers. And we also want to equip them. And that's where our outside resources, agencies, partnerships come in order to do that. And so I think if you think about this area in trauma-informed schooling, it's really taking a wraparound approach for the student and the family. But the base and the start is around Tier 1 instruction and helping students have really strong skills in order to overcome some of the challenges and the difficulties that they have. But also supporting our teachers and our educators in the classroom, that they can identify challenges very quickly, that they know what to do if a challenge occurs in a way that's supportive to students. But also, we do have the therapeutic staff within our school buildings. Like I said, each building has a social worker, each building has a school psychologist. So we have significant resources. We're leveraging our health teachers. We've increased the number of health teachers in our elementary schools. They're going to help facilitate those lessons that will be happening in the classrooms, so that so those students and those teachers are supported, and we're ensuring that we're teaching skills and we're supporting students in the manner that they need.
You mentioned something, a challenge, and one challenge that we're having here in the city is that we're dealing with a great deal of violence, you know, particularly, not particularly anything, but either shootings, there are other forms of violence. I'm certain there's some online violence. Obviously, you know, it's the penchant of many to put that ownership on the schools and the police department, but can you talk about maybe an interagency strategy or how, you know, you can support that work? Because these young people who are dealing with these issues, both as victims and in some cases on the other side, are our kids. They're all our kids.
Sure, sure. And I think you said it best. It definitely is an interagency approach. You know, each one of us have each department in each area has a specific responsibility. One of our first responsibilities as a school department is, one, realizing the partnerships and the resources that are out there in the community and be open for us to really facilitate this interagency collaboration. That's one. Two, and we've already started these conversations, we have a really great Cambridge Police Department. They are very collaborative. They are here anytime we need them. And we've been talking about mitigation measures around ensuring that our campuses are safe, right? We do not want weapons on our campuses. We want to make sure that they're safe, and they've been doing a really good job of helping us with that, and we will continue to do those types of things. But when we think about an interagency, I think that some of it has already started. You know, Counselor Simmons, Counselor McGovern, you know, you yourself, I think about Reverend Thornhill, have started these conversations within the community about what this looks like and how do we get from where we are to where we need to be. And I think it starts very early on. I think we have opportunities when we talk about universal pre-K.
Right.
I think that's where we start, because there's a preventative measure we want to take, and now for those young people and youth who are already have some involvement, we want to think about an intervention strategy. And I think that we do those wraparound services through social work support. There's a place of safe and responsive and respectful, I'm using all my R words, and trustworthy policing, and using community police, and that they're not adversarial in the community. And like I said, we have a great police department, and as a resident, I'm very happy with what I see out of the Cambridge Police Department in the way that they interact with us as community members. But I think that when we look across each one of these pieces, I think it's an infrastructure that we need to really think about how we build that. And also, I can tell you one of the biggest challenges when we have a city that's close-knit as we are, but it's really complicated. We have a lot of moving parts. One of the biggest challenges is communication, really bringing all the right stakeholders to the table at the right exact time for us to basically put together a framework of how we do this work. And I think if I had an opinion, this is just my personal opinion as a resident, not really a professional opinion, I think it's time for us to actually sit at the table and think about how we put together a framework to build an infrastructure so we can begin to address these issues of violence in our community.
You know, we're, as an innovation city, we're actually, in terms of, and I'll defer to my buddy in the back, he can probably help me with the numbers, he just came in, Anthony Galuccio, but we are losing population. And so we don't have as many young people kind of coming through the pipeline. And with that being said, I mean, you know, I'm just going to speak for myself now. I don't want to bring MBK on my rant. But we have failed our most vulnerable in this city, right? I think we have failed our most vulnerable, considering the fact that we have a relatively small swatch of people, you know, young people to work with. Considering that in terms of we have an opportunity to become the most sought-after school district in the nation, if not the world. But more importantly, how do we make sure our most vulnerable young people feel as though, and our families feel as though they're a part of that thought processes, right? Because I've often said that in terms of, you know, the per pupil expenditure, student A may get $2,000, student A, $2,000 worth of services, or feel that, family, $2,000, and the other one may feel like they're getting $28,000, so one family's like, I get $58,000, and not to kind of play the numbers game, but I do think there is, in some ways, this perspective that the most vulnerable aren't often the thought process, aren't a part of the thought process when we talk about being the best and the brightest throughout the country. So.
Sure. I really can't speak for what happened before me. Right. I think I've spoken.
That's the beauty. You get to dream. You get to dream.
I do. I get to dream very big. And so for me, it goes back to what I spoke of earlier, and having high expectations regardless, and us seeing our young folks, seeing our children, regardless, that they're going to go on and have, if they so choose to go to college, and just know as an educator and as a person who has a high-level degree, I do not believe that college is the best route for each and every person. However, I do believe that there are career paths that we can prepare students for to get them to high-level careers.
Can you talk about the academies
of Nashville that I worked with? Oh, gosh. Yes, that's my baby.
We'll filibuster for a little bit, but I think it's needed.
You just really filibustered because we weren't supposed to talk about this.
I think we need to dream a little differently, and we'd love for you to talk about that.
As you all can see, I'm shaking my head because apparently he's done his research.
I
did not have a conversation with him about this. Look, it's not on our notes. No. You just put me on the spot. Okay. No,
because I think that in terms of there's a, you know, I say that as folks come in the audience, you think of questions, and I think of my good friend in the back.
Sure.
And I think that, you know, and I'm not here to disparage or even name any schools. I don't want to do that, right?
Sure.
But I do think there's an opportunity to look at career technical education in a different way, to reimagine it, right?
Absolutely.
To think differently. We can even walk, you know, go up the road and go to places like Worcester, you know, Worcester Tech, or, you know, go to Springfield, look at Putnam. There are places, and I'm like, once again, I'm not here to say one place is doing it better. Maybe I am. But what I am saying is that in terms of it's an opportunity to look at some of the things that are happening throughout the country, and I'd be remiss to not to speak to the work that's happening in places like Texas, like, you know, Nashville as well. So yeah. I would love you to speak to that, because I think that if we want to be the best and the brightest, and if we have $223 million, right, we need to think a little bit more judiciously and dream differently. So
sure.
Let's dream together.
We can dream together. This actually goes into my past life, and so I am very proud to have been a part of developing the career academies of the Nashville Public Schools, and we call them the academies.
Right.
And what it is a high school academy model where we have created partnerships with various industries across the city. And the difference in Nashville is a large district. Right. It's 80,000 students and 130, 40 schools. And there are about 17 comprehensive high schools. Each one of those high schools have at least, some have more, but at least there are two career, the requirement is that there are at least 2 career academies across each of the high schools. The students in the community that feeds those high schools were very much integral in us designing and determining which high schools had which academies. So even if you attend that high school that doesn't have an academy that you like, you have the ability to go across town to go to the academy of your interest. So we've worked that out. But what we do is each student, as they enter in their freshman year, they do career exploration. Even if they're college bound, they do career exploration. In that career exploration, of course, we take career assessments and things of that nature. And the student, they do their exploration through their freshman year, their sophomore year, they actually choose an academy. Their junior and senior year is an internship, and then senior year is an externship. Depending on the academy, many of our students leave with certificates and or jobs. And so we also reimagine it, right? So you won't hear me really lean really hard to traditional vocational education. This is creating high-level careers. So for example, we have an academy in Nashville of Automotive Academy. We created 2 partnerships in the Automotive Academy with Ford Motor Company is one, and then Nashville Auto Diesel College. Students were learning the auto business from the inside out, not just repairing cars. They were learning the industry from top to bottom. And you could choose. If you were someone who had a mechanical nature and wanted to actually work on cars, what we taught you is how to own your own business. So you also had business development and business management in that. Because what we wanted is not just you to be a mechanic, we wanted you to be the owner of the repair shop. And so that was the concept across, again, we had partnerships with Vanderbilt Hospital, various partnerships across all of the academies. And so when I think about that, I dream big because we have a jewel in our career in RISTA. And Dr. Hernandez has done a really great job developing it and bringing it to where it is now. And he and I had a lovely conversation about a couple of weeks ago. And they're right now in the process of doing a self-evaluation of the competencies and the quality and the work that we've been doing in RISTA. But we're at a good place with that evaluation. We'll be able to really think about where we want to go next with our career and technical school and our technical program that's at the high school.
You talked about, I'm going to pivot a little bit, you talked about being in a good place. And one of the things, and this is not in any way to disparage your predecessor or anyone else in this particular role, but when you watch, at least when I watched television or my phone at sometimes, and this is kind of directly, it seemed to be a fractured communication between the school committee and the school administration, that's not indicative of one superintendent. It just seems like there's something that goes on throughout our country where folks don't feel like they could get to know each other, right? And I'm not going to talk about just the other, kind of elephant in the room, that this is an election year and folks do things a little differently. But my question particularly is that, specifically I should say, is how do you guys been talking about the retreats and other things, so how do you make sure that relationship looks solid or is solid so that the folks who are watching either on television or going to those particular meetings say, wow, those adults are really on the same page for young people. And I think that's critically important. So I'm just curious in terms of how do you see that working out, where it's not just cosmetic, but there's a real synergy where we feel like these policymakers and our administration are on the same page. And it may take some, and this may be something as well, maybe I'm giving some advice, and I don't know if it's good advice, but kind of helping us understand your roles. Sure. As a community, right? Like, what do folks do, and how do things get done?
Yeah. So I can't speak.
Hopefully that was clear.
Yes.
And I just want to reiterate, I am not here in any way saying any previous person did anything bad. I am saying that in terms of when you watch the television, you feel as though there's a disconnect. And when you see that disconnect, it creates a level of anxiety for the educators in this room, for the students in this room, to go into a building where they don't feel like the folks who are making decisions for them are on the same page, nonetheless about wearing a mask, but even kind of making sure that they're being educated to the highest of levels. So I just want to be clear that I'm not in any way saying anyone prior in the future is a bad person, but I am saying in terms of, and this is not just indicative of the school committee, the city council as well. And we only have a little bit of time here. I don't want to get on the city council, but, so I just wanted to kind of talk to that a little bit.
Sure. So I can only speak to my experience,
right.
and I have to say that I have coined my entry into the Cambridge Public Schools as turning a new page. And I feel like, let me say this, the relationship between me as the superintendent
right.
and the school committee is solid.
Great.
It is a solid relationship. I feel very supported by the members of the committee. They have been very supportive as we've been making this, I've been transitioning in. I've had great conversations. As I said, I met with each member one-on-one. Actually, I think it was only a month ago. Like, I got here in July, so I met with them in July. Mm-hmm. I'm putting together now a calendar. I will be meeting either one-on-one in small groups monthly with the members so that we can remain on the same page around the work, and so I can better understand what some of the concerns are that may be permeating in the community that come through the school committee, and we can, I don't like being behind the eight ball, I like being ahead of the eight ball, and I think that would be helpful to do that. We had a really great school committee and superintendent retreat. We have another retreat that's planned that I will be bringing my whole administrative cabinet into that retreat, and that we will continue to work around how we work together, how we communicate, how do we want to approach the work and the focus around the work. And so I view my experience the past 68 days as a very good one, and I'm very hopeful. I can email, I can call, I can text, they can do the same for me, and that's actually what the relationship has been like with all 7 members.
Right. So we're going to do something a little different. If it wasn't, we do things a little different. And so we're going to do 2 things. The first is that I'm going to read a couple of questions from our live stream.
Sure.
And then I want you to talk a little bit about the homework or classwork that you have for us.
I can do that.
And I want us to think about this in a way in which, because one of the things what happens, and I look to Dr. Turk and Mr. Fernandez and others from the district, is that we want to, in some ways, create questions because you're the superintendent and you empower your folks that are district-wide, and they're not specific in that, in another way, create a dissonance, with your, the folks in which you work for. And so as we think about questions, and not to in any way say that a question about the school A or school B is not important. However, I think it's important to bring that question to school leader A or school leader B so that we don't create any dissonance in that particular space. Is that fair? Okay. So there are 2 questions that from live feed that I think are really cool. One reads, is it possible to have as a part of our children's health curriculum a conflict strategy to include resolution and mediation techniques?
I do believe so. Actually, part of our SEL strategy, again, when I go back to problem solving and conflict resolution, that's part of the work that we're doing in SEL, and also some of the curriculum that has been adopted.
Okay, awesome. Another question we have is, what challenges do you anticipate that you will encounter both professionally and personally as you embark on this path towards your vision?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that once more?
Essentially, what challenges do you anticipate both professionally, well, I would say professionally, as you embark on this path towards your vision in terms of...
Did it ask personally?
It did, but I don't want to be in anyone's business. It's not my thing.
I'm an open book, Mr. Clark.
All right.
Professionally, challenges. I think it goes back to what I shared earlier when I said that we are a complicated organism. One of our greatest challenges in our district, actually in our community, is communication.
Right.
And my team and I have been working tirelessly this summer, the past 60 days. I keep saying this summer as if I got here like in May or something. But we've been working tirelessly the past 60 days to be very intentional about the way in which we communicate and ensuring that the work that Ms. Harris is doing with our parents and our families, that it's accessible information, that it's meaningful and it's purposeful information, and that it's thoughtful. I'm a big believer that when we put out information, I also want to be able to, as best as I can and as appropriate as I can, also share the decision-making process. And we're working through that as an administrative team to really help us all think about how we go from a challenge, a situation, to a decision. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we have, I know it sounds really weird and crazy because we have such a complicated work to do, but it's really communication. I think about that. I've been with my administrative team for the past 3 days, and it's clarifying, it's making clear, it's them asking really good questions of us so we're able to respond thoughtfully so they have the right information to go back to their buildings and do their best work.
You know, you mentioned something, and, you know, one thing, you know, I think Cambridge does a good job, but sometimes not so well, and it kind of becomes this nauseum, is that everyone is an educator in the city. Like, everyone loves kids, and everyone's an educator. And I'm not here, maybe I try to fancy as one as well from time to time. And with that being said, all of these folks are going to be kind of tugging at you.
Sure.
I have this idea, I have that idea, I think we could do this differently. You know, how do you kind of navigate that, considering that there are going to be folks who are coming with a number of ideas to, you know, with all good intentions, right? I think everyone comes in with the best of intentions,
Sure.
right? And so one of the things in which we do as an organization, and you know, we utilize our institutional resources. We utilize, you know, our Ruby Pierce and Kathy Reddick and a number of other folks to say, look, I don't know that, this person does, right?
Absolutely.
But like, how do you do that? Like,
Sure.
how's that work for you?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, you make a very good point. I think while I talk about the process that I take to enter the district, having focus groups and keeping those lines of communication open so we can garner input. I really do believe that people need to be heard, but it goes back to what I said about decision-making and our decision-making process. I listen very intently, and, you know, I do only have a certain bandwidth. That's why Dr. Turk is my right hand, and I have a team, executive leadership team of 9 people, because I also need them in order to listen as well. And so taking that information in, filtering it through our vision, filtering it through our focus and our goals for the year is how then we come to determine whether we're able to go down a particular road or street that someone is recommending. But because I know we do have many experts, and there's a lot of institutional knowledge.
A lot of great folks here.
Yeah, in our community. And I was actually having a conversation earlier, and I think it's Dr. Pierce that was sharing me that she has access to some of the alumni students. And I was thinking, well, if that's the case, then let's think about, I would love to hear what their experience was like, so we can think about what worked, and goes back to this form that I have out here, right? So doing things such as that, making those connections, that's why it's important for me to be in the community. But I am only one person, and someone asked what my personal challenge was. I'm a workaholic.
Right.
I'm a workaholic. I love what I do, and I want to do it well. But I also have learned my lesson. This is not my first rodeo as a superintendent. I want to do this well. I want to do it for a long time, and the healthier I am, the better I can do it. And so I know I'm learning to be in this rhythm of grace around how I spend my time in my work and in my life. And so as I do that, that's how I deal with the challenge around me being a workaholic. And you know, being transparent, my husband and I and our boys are very, very close. I have a very close-knit family, even in my South, and they are my accountability. My sister probably is going to call me at 7:45 and say, are you done and are you on your way home?
Right.
And so
So we'll make sure we get you out here on time.
I promise
I don't want no calls from London.
She's watching, so she's definitely she's going to do that. So that's how I'm able to do that. But you know, I think it's important also that people understand I'm human, and that's the transparency that I bring to this.
Right.
Is that I'm never going to tell you that I have all the answers, and I'm never going to tell you that I'm always going to get it right. What I will tell you is I'm going to work hard for you. I'm going to listen, and when we make mistakes, I'll own up to them, but we're also going to recharge the course to get back on the right track.
You know, I have two questions from the live stream, and they're not synonymous, so I want to be fair to them. But one thing that you are, you know, a revered expert in special education. And the question, there's two questions. I'll just read the first one, but what is your vision the question reads, what is your vision for special education? Okay. But I want you to kind of take us wherever you want to take us, and maybe even speak to the work that you have done, you know, nationally, to kind of help us see how we can dream here in Cambridge.
Right, absolutely. One, we need to take the limits off. Just because a child has a learning difference, no matter the significance of that learning difference, they have high potential to do great things. And so it starts with that. Also, we need to find the things that our children do well, and we need to help continue to cultivate that as best we can. Transparency. My oldest son has a significant language-based learning disability, and so he's challenged in many areas. But the thing he does really, really well, he is a phenomenal artist. So we have been pouring into him with his art. We've been pouring. He's also really into MMA. Both of my boys are, and because he is
my knees can't do that.
Right, but he's really good at it, and because he's a man child, he's 12, and I was just sharing with one of my friends, he's 12, and he is standing right now 5'6" and he's 5'6", and he's 12 years old, but he has the body for that. So pouring in to the things that our students do well, who have learning challenges, and cultivating their learning through that. And we have many different educators in our community that do that and do that very, very well. And I think the key to that is relationships. When we talk about supporting students who have learning differences and supporting families of students who have learning differences, we have to build those relationships. They have to be intentional. We have to understand the intricate parts of what makes that student work and tick. And it's basically a puzzle, and we have to put the puzzle pieces together to make their outcomes be just as good or great as any other student.
You know, there's another question here, but I'll hold this for a moment, but you mentioned something, and I look to Ms. Harris as well in terms of when we think about family engagement, you know, not necessarily what's your vision, because I think that's putting too much pressure on any individual, but in terms of when you hear that word, those words, I should say family engagement, what comes to mind?
When I hear the term family engagement, first of all, parents are our partners. They are parents. I don't care. They are our children's first teachers, and we need to value that, and we need to listen to that. And so that's actually what comes when we talk about that. That's the first thing that comes to mind, and then allowing and creating the structures and the space for them to join in the work with us. Instead of us doing something for and to families, I want families to join in the work with us. And so that's what family engagement means. I know Ms. Harris has a very more structured response, but you asked me, what does it mean to me? And that's what it means to me.
Right, and so one of the things in which, I don't want to say all families feel like they've been engaged and some families don't, but before conducting this conversation, we heard from a number of families who wanted me to ask you the question around what is your vision for bilingual education? And in many of the emails in which we read, you know, it was very clear that some of these families felt that, and I want to be clear, it was kind of two delineations of emails. Some families who have kind of coming to the district after being in another district and feeling as though, you know what, I felt kind of out, you know, I felt like I was a proverbial outcast in District A, and then I came here, and then there were some really great things happening, and then COVID hit, and things didn't kind of manifest the way in which I thought they, you know, thought they should have. But in terms of one of the questions that was asked over and over, at least in our email, was, what is your vision for bilingual education?
Right. I'm going to clarify because people use the term bilingual education interchangeably when we have students who are English learners.
Right.
Are we speaking of students who are English learners, or are we speaking of our dual language programs?
Well, one was about a dual language
Sure.
program. I mean, obviously it had specifically to a particular school, which we're not going to do here.
Sure.
But the number of the questions were around in terms of bilingual education specifically. And there
Right.
was one question around the school, but I don't remember the question, and I'm not going to paraphrase it and in turn maybe disparage, you know, what the person said. So.
Sure. Let me first start off by saying that goes back to what I shared in communication. We realize that we have many bilingual and multilingual families and students. And so that's why we're very intentional and have gotten very intentional. And even now, Ms. Harris has been doing work with the Family Policy Council around language justice. So we can make sure not only as a school department, but as an entire city and community, that we're really being thoughtful in how we communicate with our families who are bilingual and multilingual, and also many of our families who are new even to the country and coming here, and they still have not, their first language is not English. And so we're being really intentional about the way we communicate with that. For me, I don't view bilingual education any differently in my passion than I do in my passion for student with learning differences. It goes back to what I just said, high expectations, understanding that there is much value in being bilingual and multilingual. We can learn culturally as a nation from our international brothers and sisters, and I think we need to take on what we really believe in here in Cambridge, that we value each and every person that comes here. And my vision for bilingual education is my vision for each and every student that enters the doors of the Cambridge Public Schools, that they will go out into this world and be great and do great things, and that we will build relationships with them and their families and caregivers, and we will set them on a path to success.
So considering that the start of the school year is around the corner, and you know, obviously you have a lot on your plate, as does your team, before these doors open.
Sure.
But one of the things in which we want you to do is have a little bit of fun, right?
Yeah.
So we got to have fun, right?
Sure.
So how do we make September, what's it 9th? September 9th.
September the 9th.
September the 9th. How do we make that a day of just joyous and fun, and kids are walking in the buildings, they're excited?
Sure.
And how do we make sure your schedule is, you know, clear so you can make it to every particular school, if not every school, but how do you have fun as you go by those schools? So how do we make that day fun, considering that you got these masks on and other type of things, like, you know, how do we have fun that day? And what will you need from other folks to help it make it fun? You know, we'll get Galuccio and, you know, he'll do some fun stuff for us, but like, how do we make it fun that day?
So first of all, you all do not know, and this is why Dr. Turk and I are kindred spirits, because our very favorite...
I'm still waiting for some Girl Scout cookies from Dr.
Well,
Turk,
you
by
have
the
to
way.
talk to her about that.
All right, okay, we're gonna have to figure that out, but how do we have fun?
So our very most exciting, and I'm not even saying this correctly, but my favorite time of the year, Dr. Turk's favorite, and I'm saying this because we just talked about, I was dancing around the office about this.
Okay.
It is the start of the school year. It is the first day of school. So first of all, there should not even be a question if Victoria Greer is going to be at every school.
All right.
I have already, my calendar is blocked. I have nothing else on my calendar that day.
We won't tell your sister.
She already knows. She knows how I am on the first day of school. I do not sleep the night before. I am up about 3 a.m. I'm already getting myself together because I am going to hit the door running. And the first thing that I do is I I have mapped it out. I've already mapped it out.
Got
My
it.
assistant and I have already mapped the day out so I can get to the closest school from my house and go from there. I had a conversation with the mayor today. I'm going to be inviting our school committee members along. We're getting welcome signs for us to be holding, but any community member that is free of the morning of September the 9th to welcome our students, I ask that you get out on the sidewalks, you encourage them, you clap for them, you scream for them, but we make it a day that we're welcoming our students back in a manner that they're excited and our teachers are excited, and I know our teachers are excited and our staff are excited about returning to the buildings and being in the buildings and having children in the buildings and hearing the buzz of children. And so I just say that we need to, as students are walking to school, as parents are dropping off in cars, that we're rooting them on, and as our teachers are entering the buildings, that we're rooting them on. And I ask anyone, if you want to come along for the ride, I'm going to every school. I think I'm starting at the Peabody School.
Okay, awesome. So you have a little bit of a homework for us.
Yes, I do.
I'm gonna have a couple of thoughts before we end. We want to make sure you get you on the road before your sister calls.
She will be calling,
All right.
just so you know. So for those of you who all came in late, I'm really trying to garner feedback in relation to the work moving forward and get your input, and also to help inform the use of our ESSER 3 funds. And so you have a feedback form here that we would love for you to take a moment and fill out. And my Chief Strategy Officer, Dr. Brown, is here, and she will take those, or you can put them on the table as you leave. But please take a moment to fill them out, because we really do value your input and need your help in us making sure that we put together a really good, thoughtful plan for our district.
Thank you. So one of the things in which we started off earlier, you know, today is a conversation not led by MBK, but we've hosted it in conjunction with 22 City View and Danielle and Calvin and the great staff who's also here working with us today. But this is a we conversation. Cambridge is a smorgasbord of a lot of ideas. We're here because of the audacity of the Cambridge Community Foundation and their report and looking at some of these things. We're here because of the grit and a lot of the great work that Anthony Galluccio does on behalf of young people. We're here because of, you know, the leadership that Ruby Pierce and others have shown us. You know, we're here when we look at the work that Susan Richards has done throughout the course of the years. And also we're here for folks like, you know, Mayor Ken Reeves and the work in which he's looked at around achievement and making sure that we push the proverbial levers for all our young people. So we are a smorgasbord of we, and although this particular conversation is being co-sponsored with 22 City View, the Cambridge Public Schools, and a number of other folks, I want to just be clear is that we're not an individual organization that looks at a silo. We know that this particular community is better as a fist, and we're a Voltron. So there are a number of organizations in this room that are doing great work. I think we need to celebrate them. I know that this weekend, I think Friday, is a back-to-school drive, with the Friday Night Hype. The Cambridge community, Cambridge Families of Color is doing some really great work. And if I missed you, blame it on my head, not my heart. I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This is extraordinary. And I want to just thank you for allowing us to have this particular conversation, considering the fact that, I want to go back to our initial reasons for having this. We're asking young people to be excited and to walk into school buildings and be masked up every day. So we have to be brave enough to put ourselves in rooms to have these conversations as well. So I want to thank you. I want to thank your team. And I want to just say that before I close out, is that, you know, any way I can help on the 9th, I'm not going to multiple schools, you know. I got to make sure I drop mine off so I don't have no problems. But I just also want to acknowledge the fact that in terms of any way that, you know, we can help, if there's something on that particular list, maybe it's a place where, you know, we can have our folks, Frank Barnes and others at a particular school. I will say before we close out, we always close our meetings with the ancestral prayer. My friend, my mentor, and MBK co-founder Frank Barnes will be closing us out.
Thank you, Superintendent Greer,
Thank you.
for being here this evening, as well as the community. First and foremost, just a couple of announcements that I got through my text. And I don't know if you brought it up because I was speaking and talking on the phone with some patients, patients. I used to be a mental health counselor. Parents of the Haitian community descent, and they wanted to know, given the tragedy of over 2,000 people that died in Haiti, and the connection, the strong connection in Cambridge with the school, is there going to be any mental health providers or counselors to advocate and help them go through this terrible time? Not only we dealt with COVID-19 and continue to, but I think this is an additional trauma that these young children are going through, and I think that some of them don't speak English as a second language, so I applaud and hope that your administration will take that in consideration and think about. And the second thing, for me, I have to be a truth teller. And one of the things that MBK we take pride in saying is that the reward of doing great work is more great work. Dr. King said it better. If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way. And I think collaboratively in Cambridge, we can do small things in a great way. And I'm looking forward to your leadership. And we are very excited that you are a part of Cambridge.
Thank you.
And over the past summer, MBK worked with a group of youth at the Dennehy Field. And again, as a former mental health counselor, and working with the city through the youth centers and community schools over 25 plus years, I was very disheartening to hear some of the comments at the end of the program that the students had to share with me confidentially. And for me, I need to be a truth teller and be honest to what I heard. And hopefully we can rectify the situation and talk more at length. But some of the highlights that was disheartening to me was that we had rising seniors saying they didn't know what they're gonna do next year. We had rising seniors said we had counselors and teachers really didn't have interest in what they wanted to do. We had rising seasons says, well, Frank, this is the first time we heard about financial literacy and how we can be entrepreneurs, how we can be independent builders and electricians and scientists and robotics. And I said, well, doesn't your counselors, your school talk about that? And they said, no. And I said, by show of hands, how many students here know that per student is about $25,000, $20,000, $30,000? Not one raised their hand. And my question to them the next day was, do you think you're getting $30,000 worth of education? And so I'm not here to pose any disparities of education, but I think that's something that we need to think about. And I think it's very disingenuous for us, me personally speaking on the MBK, to say to our students we're scholars when we're not providing them with scholarly material. We're not. We have MIT and Harvard here, and it's a shame that those students walk by there and don't dream that they can become and work and be educated there. That's a problem. And this is the disconnect that we have to be honest as a city. What are we to each other? What really are to each other? You know, I think that in your discussion you had with Tony, I don't know if you brought out the issue about anti-racism and and hatred that goes on in our city. But we need to address these two separate cities. You know, we really need to come to terms with that, and we need to be honest with our students. Again, I'm speaking for the voiceless of the students that I work with this summer. And they will say, well, Frank, I'll give a perfect case in point, and I'm not gonna elaborate on it, about the young ladies came up to me and said, what about what happened over the past about the misogyny and the football team and all that? And I said, well, what did you guys do? Well, they had the school committee, young people, and I applaud them, were speaking on their behalf, but the ball dropped. Hopefully that can be picked up again and show those young ladies that we are in support of you, of any type of verbal or physical abuse while you're in this school or even outside these school dorms. So I thought about it long and hard last night because it really kind of pained me to see that our students is not getting their $30,000 worth. So this is for them. To the Cambridge school administrators and educators, we must be honest with our students to tell them the truth. For the students who are here this evening or watching on 22 City View, I say this to you. Nothing is wrong with you. Something happened to you. Non-white people under the system of racism, white supremacy, when you're in a natural environment, it is natural that you would act unnatural. So I want to say that again because that goes to the violence with the shootings in our city. When you're in a natural environment, it is natural that you would act unnatural. Racism is built into the DNA of America. As long as we, as educators, turn a blind eye to the pain of those suffering under its oppression, we as people of goodwill will never escape that origin. Students should learn history through an anti-fascist, anti-racist lens, not only learning about the role of white supremacy and racism in history, but doing so in a way that empowers them to pursue social justice. We must as a community, replace racism, white supremacy with justice. You know, I recommend we probably look into and investigate the 1619 Project and even Eyes on the Prize. You know, our kids need to know that they're better than what they are. Some of the takeaways that I find very inspiring was that, you know, they still came and they still wanted to know that we as adults have their back. That's all they're looking for. We go more than our expectations is for them. We need to do the same. We need to believe in our students and let our students know we are here there for them. And I think that the trauma that they're going through, a lot of them had difficulty telling them. So I gave them my email, some of the email about some of the traumas they have in their home environment, how they're afraid to go back to school this year because they know now they're juniors and seniors. If they didn't get, you know, the support the first 2 years, what makes you think they're going to get the support the last 2 years? So these are honest dialogues that we need to have. And so I just wanted to share that. And so as MBK Cambridge, we always close out with our ancestral recognition of prayer. And it goes like this. May we always remember those who have gone before us. May we be inspired by their vision and valor. May their lives continue to remind us that service is more important than success, that people are more important than possessions. Principle is more important than power. May whatever we do be molded and shaped by honesty, excellence, and commitment. May our children and children's carry forth with pride the nobility of history that are represented here, the various traditions in the room, the creator of all of us, by whatever name we may refer to the creator. We dedicate our lives to create our world better and more beautiful. So I say good night, thank you for attending, and Ashe.
Good night.